Good afternoon, and welcome to a State Questions Forum co-produced by the League of Women Voters of Oklahoma and the Tulsa World Let's Talk virtual town hall. I'm Wayne Green, editorial pages editor of the Tulsa World and a member of the League of Women Voters. I'll be your moderator today. Our purpose is to discuss the two state questions that will appear on the November 3rd general election ballot with forceful advocates from both sides. Our discussions are simultaneously being streamed on the League of Women Voters Facebook page and YouTube channel, and on a closed Zoom room for the advocates and the event's producers. When we are finished, the forum will be posted on the League's Facebook and web pages and will be presented next week as part of the Tulsa World's Let's Talk virtual town hall series. The Tulsa World's Let's Talk virtual town hall series is graciously sponsored by the George Kaiser Family Foundation. After today's forum, League members are invited to continue the conversation on a separate Zoom channel that will be used by the League's Board of Directors in forming an advocacy position on State Questions 805 and 814. I'm going to quickly explain the ground rules for today's forum. In a few minutes, I'm going to introduce the advocates for State Question 805 and give each up to 6 minutes to introduce their arguments. After that, we'll have up to 20 minutes of questions and answers submitted by your audience. I will direct the questions to individual advocates or both and give them up to 2 minutes to answer each question. When our question period is over, each side will be given up to 2 minutes to summarize their positions. Then we'll bring in the advocates to do the same thing with State Question 814. Anyone watching today is invited to submit questions to our panelists through the comments section on either of our Facebook or YouTube pages. Our question screener today is Jackie Finley. She will sort the questions, make sure they're relevant, perhaps combine similar questions and send them on to me for posing to our panelists. We ask you to keep your manners in the questions. Keep everything civil, polite, defamation free. While you can direct questions to specific panelists, we ask that you concentrate on policy issues, not personalities. Our timekeeper today is Stephanie Henson. She will be timing our advocates' opening statements, their answers to questions, and their closing remarks. On our Zoom channel, she will signal to the advocates when they are running out of time and when they're out of time. Our producer, Shay Marion, will have the power to mute the microphones of anyone who goes over that time, but I'm sure that's not going to be a problem tonight. Isn't technology amazing? Let's see if it works. State Question 805 was the result of a successful initiative petition drive. To begin our discussion on State Question 805, I'm going to read the ballot title that voters will see November 3rd. This measure seeks to add a new Article 2A to the Oklahoma Constitution. This new article accepts and does not apply to people who have ever been convicted of a violent felony. It would prohibit the use of a former felony conviction to increase the statutorily allowable base range for punishment for a person subsequently convicted of a felony. Individuals who are currently incarcerated for felony sentences that were enhanced based on one or more felony convictions and whose sentences are greater than the maximum sentence that may currently be imposed for such felonies may seek sentence modification in court. The new article sets forth a detailed process for such sentence modification, including but not limited to requirements for a hearing, appointment of counsel for indigent petitioners, and notifications of victims, and requires that the court impose a modified sentence no greater than the current maximum sentence, which may be imposed on a person convicted of the same felony with no former felony convictions, and which results in no greater time served in prison than under the original sentence. It establishes an appeal procedure, provides an effective date, and contains the severability clause. Speaking in favor of State Question 805 today is Sarah Edwards. Sarah Edwards is the president of the Yes on 805 campaign. She has been a speaker on various panels throughout Oklahoma regarding the state's status on incarceration. She advocated for the criminal justice reform State Questions 780 and 781, both of which were approved by voters in 2016. Edwards serves on various boards, including Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform and Citizens for Children and Families. She is the chair of the Children and Families Council of Oklahoma County. She received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Oklahoma and has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Southern Methodist University. She's also an attorney with Hartzog Conger Kaysen Law Firm, specializing in areas of business and information technology sourcing, corporate law, healthcare and commercial lending, and financial transactions. Her greatest joys are her 3 children ages 9, 7, and 5. Speaking against State Question 805 today will be Kelly Masters Newton. Kelly Masters Newton works as the legal director for Palomar, Oklahoma City's Family Justice Center. Kelly was born and raised in Southeast Kansas, but relocated to Oklahoma for law school. She graduated from the University of Tulsa Law School in 2006 and began her career managing the legal department for the Oklahoma City office of Globe Life and Accident Insurance Company, where she worked for close to 13 years. Always having a passion for women's issues, Kelly left Globe Life to take the position of legal director at Palomar. At Palomar, Kelly manages the Palomar Legal Network, a new pro bono civil legal services program for clients escaping violence. She resides in Oklahoma City with her husband and 3 elementary school children. Sarah Edwards, I'm going to give you 6 minutes to introduce your arguments for State Question 805.
Thank you so much, Wayne. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to advocate on this important initiative. I will share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. Okay. So Oklahoma has one of the highest rates of imprisonment in the country and has held the top spots for incarceration of women for 3 decades now. Oklahomans spend more than $500 million a year on prisons. One of the biggest reasons for the incarceration crisis that we're in is Oklahoma's use of sentence enhancements that add years or decades to a person's sentence for nonviolent offenses. Sentence enhancements are resulting in unjust sentences in Oklahoma. Here are a few examples. Barry sentenced to 20 years for stealing a lawnmower. Amy, 30 years old, sentenced to 15 years for shoplifting. Bruce, an Army veteran, sentenced to 17 years for pawning an HP laptop. Mary, 29, serving a 20-year sentence for writing fraudulent checks. And I just would like to point out that it costs approximately $20,000 per year per person that we incarcerate for these crimes. State question, what does State Question 805 do? It would end the practice of adding years to a person's prison sentence for crimes classified as nonviolent or not classified as violent as of January 1, 2020, because the person had a prior nonviolent conviction. State Question 805 does not give people a free pass. If it passes, people convicted of nonviolent crimes could still be sentenced up to the maximum allowable time in prison for that current crime. State Question 805 is projected to reduce the prison population by 8.5%, with expected savings of at least $142 million up to $186 million over the next 10 years. Taxpayer savings of up to $27 million per year would continue indefinitely into the future. These funds could be directed to substance abuse and mental health services, victim services, re-entry programs, or other public safety priorities. What does State Question 805 not do? State Question 805 does not eliminate serious penalties for violent crimes, including domestic abuse and assault crimes. It does not prevent sentencing bodies from taking a person's prior criminal history into account for sentencing, up to the maximum sentence. State Question 805 does not reduce or change the underlying sentence for any crime. So those convicted of repeat domestic abuse will still face a prison sentence of up to 10 years. Those convicted of 2 or more DUI offenses can still receive a felony and face significant prison time. If State Question 805 passes, people who commit domestic abuse will still be held accountable. District attorneys maintain discretion to charge abuse as a violent assault and battery crime, which would still be subject to enhancements. Again, the sentence for repeat domestic abuse is 10 years, and before someone convicted of domestic abuse can be released on parole, they must pass 2 separate reviews by the parole board instead of 1, and the governor must sign off on their release. Currently, 80% of those in prison, Oklahoma prisons, for repeat domestic violence do not have an enhanced sentence, a sentence beyond the 10-year maximum, and will not be affected by 805. However, the $186 million in savings could be better invested in services to help survivors recover and heal and stop the cycle of abuse. Why an Oklahoma constitutional amendment? Enhancements for nonviolent crimes are set forth in various titles of Oklahoma law. This will ensure that all nonviolent enhancements are included. Another reason is the legislature has attempted to roll back State Question 780 and 781 every session since its enactment by 56% of Oklahoma voters in 2016, despite positive outcomes from it. We've had a 9% decline in the prison population, 4.4% decline in property crimes, 17% decrease in murder, 12% decrease in robbery. During our time with 780 and 781, advocating for that initiative, certain district attorneys were predicting that crime waves would occur across the state. This has not occurred. And as you can see, crime has decreased. And the governor was able to appropriate an additional $10 million to the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services for treatment in 2020 as a result of savings. We are way out of line with other states in our sentencing. We incarcerate 70 to 79% longer for drug and property crimes. We incarcerate 18-year-olds 77% more than the national average. And just to note, the human brain is not fully developed until around age 25. We incarcerate 65 and older 72% more than the national average. Enhancements in Oklahoma are used in 4 out of 5 cases, where in other states that use enhancements, they're used in one out of 5 cases. Sorry, that was my timer. We are out of line. Please vote yes on 805 to change this trajectory. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Kelly Masters Newton, you have 6 minutes to present your case.
Yes, thank you so much. I am actually here to speak on State Question 805 in opposition, looking at the potential impacts of domestic violence in regards to domestic violence survivors. So we know State Question 805 is going to eliminate the use of a person's nonviolent felony criminal conviction to enhance range of punishment for their current nonviolent felony crime. Violent felony under State Question 805 is actually defined as a felony offense under 57 OS Section 571 as of January 1st, 2020. However, many of nonviolent felonies in Oklahoma are actually, in fact, violent. These include all domestic violence crimes. Majority of states classify domestic violence crimes as violent. As of January 1st, 2020, Oklahoma was not one of them. And that includes DV, strangulation, which we know has a high lethality rate, DV against an intimate partner with a sharp, dangerous, or deadly weapon, and even DV committed against a pregnant woman that results in miscarriage or fetal impairment. Some additional nonviolent crimes under Oklahoma law that I just wanted to make everyone aware of are hate crimes, child sex crimes, all animal cruelty crimes, all DUI crimes, including negligent homicide while intoxicated, and then several more crimes that negatively impact women, such as stalking, BPO violations, and revenge porn, just to name a few. So we know House Bill 3251 was passed last legislative session, and it did add DV strangulation, DV assault with a dangerous weapon, DV assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and DV assault and battery with a deadly weapon to the violent crime statute. However, these actually don't go into effect until November 1, 2020. Since State Question 805 is going to freeze the definition of violent crimes for purposes of sentence enhancement to only the 52 crimes that are violent currently under Oklahoma law, it's going to preclude those that were previously added as DV crimes as violent. Those will not be able to be used as violent crimes for purposes of sentence enhancement. And actually to add or remove crimes for purposes of sentence enhancements to the violent felonies list would require another constitutional amendment that would need to pass by popular vote. So as Sarah stated, assault and battery is a violent crime. DV assault and battery is a non-violent crime. Prosecutors should be able to just charge assault and battery as a violent crime. However, the law precludes this under Oklahoma, statutory and case law. If there's two provisions of law making any specific act or omission criminal, if there's a specific provision and it provides a punishment for that provision, the offense really should be governed by the specific code, not the general code. I actually talked to a prosecutor just last week who had a offender that she was trying to bind over charges for, who had a significant laundry list of previous nonviolent DV crimes. And she tried to bind over on the assault and battery, and then the DV assault and battery violent, DV assault and battery nonviolent, tried to bind over both, and the judge said, no, you can't do that. You can only bind over charges on the nonviolent DV assault and battery because it was an intimate partner situation. Also, another reason we want prosecutors to charge under the specific code is that cessation and rehabilitation programs for offenders only exist under the specific code for that crime. So I use the example of batterers intervention programs. Those are only available under the DV assault and battery charges, not under general assault and battery. So here's just a general case study I wanted to make everyone aware of. This gentleman is a DV perpetrator. He had, as you can see, a very long list of DV assault and battery and domestic abuse charges. He actually was put on probation for the 2013 and 2015 charges and convictions. In 2016, he was convicted. He was convicted of actually beating a woman with a high-heeled shoe. He threatened her with a power drill and held her hostage. He strangled her to the point of defecation, which we know is just minutes away from death, and then burnt the bottom of her foot with a soldering iron. He actually was received a sentence of 5 years, but only had to serve 1 year and 9 months of that sentence. So under State Question 805, you wouldn't be using any of these previous charges in order to enhance his sentence. And so if he was charged and convicted of DV assault and battery, as he had been in the past, the max sentence for a felony conviction is 4 years. So he would only be able to be max sentenced for 4 years, and actually would only be required to serve 1 year or 25% of that sentence, because these are crimes where the perpetrator is only required to serve 25% of those sentences. Criminal justice reform is desperately needed, and I appreciate Ms. Edwards in her presentation in that regard. But unfortunately, this constitutional amendment leaves victims vulnerable. And we know it's retroactive, so offenders can request by petition to have their sentence.
Nope. I believe your time has run out. Is that right? Yes.
Actually, Ms. Masters-Newton has 30 seconds remaining.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry.
I'll show the red as we have 1 minute remaining.
Continue with your statement. I think Kelly may still be muted, though.
It keeps muting me. Okay. State Question 805 will also reduce the accountability for offenders by charging them as first-time offenders, even for the max sentence, each time they commit these heinous DV offenses. Reduced incarceration rates cannot be placed above victim safety. And we need to finally treat these crimes as serious crimes and allow enhancements for these sentences, which is why I say we need to vote yes or no on 805.
All right, thank you, and we apologize for the technical problem there towards the end of your statement. Now we're going to move on to the question and answer portion of our program. Remember that you, members of our audience, we're here to answer your questions. So please post them in the comment section, either of our Facebook or our YouTube live presentation today. And let us know who you want to direct the questions to and what you want answered. Let's start with this question, and I'm going to direct it to both of you. At the Corrections Board meeting Wednesday, we saw that the state prison population has gone down 15% just 12 months ago. And for the first time in memory, the prison assistance population is lower than its technical capacity. And that's the partial result of things like State Question 780 and criminal justice reform out of the legislature, but it's also a result of one-time things that have to do with the pandemic, such as the Corrections Department not receiving any more prisoners. But even before the pandemic, the trend line was clearly down for the state prison population. Sarah, I'm going to ask you this question first. Do we really need State Question 805 to get our state prison population figures under control?
Thanks, Wayne. Yes, we do. I mean, despite the success of State Question 780 and 781, we're still not reducing what's in line with other states. We're still at the top, and we're still spending resources on incarcerating people for with excessive sentences, not getting to the root cause of the issue to stop the criminal behavior and to stop recidivism, in order and spending resources on those things that will stop recidivism, that we know work: job training, education, mental health treatment, and substance abuse. We incarcerate more mentally ill than anything. It's not right, and we're spending a lot of money to do it. So yes, we need to get our sentences back in line with the national average, and State Question 805 is necessary to do that.
Kelly, what's your answer to that question?
Well, I think we're going in the right direction. We're coming to the table, we're reducing incarceration rates. And I think this really needs to happen at the legislative level. I don't think passing a constitutional amendment that freezes what is a violent felony in perpetuity forever and ever is the way to go about this. We have several nonviolent felonies that I pointed out that are in fact incredibly violent in nature. And the fact that we are not treating those offenders seriously poses a major risk to public safety and victim safety.
Would the legislature not have the authority to add new crimes to the violent crime list in the future?
Even if crimes are added to the violent crimes list, because those DV crimes that I pointed out previously will still be violent crimes under Oklahoma law, but you will not be able to use those crimes without, as first sentence enhancement, if 805 were to pass, unless there was an additional constitutional amendment that passed by popular vote.
Do you agree with that, Sarah?
There are a few things that aren't correct that I'd like to address. But no, I mean, one thing, what was listed, child trafficking, that's human trafficking, which is still a violent offense. The gentleman that...
I don't mean to give you time for a rebuttal.
Sure.
The question is, can the legislature add new crimes to the violent crime, the list of violent crimes, and have them apply useful for sentence enhancement?
Wayne, the legislature can modify the individual sentences for the crimes, which is really a more appropriate way to go about it. I mean, right now, enhancements are above the maximum penalty in law, are used with inconsistent application among districts.
All right. Here's a question from our viewing audience today. There's concerns a flyer that she's received from the opponents of State Question 805 that says that individuals. Let's see here. No, I'm sorry. This is from the proponents of State Question 805. It says, what does State Question 805 not do? It does not prevent prosecutors or judges from taking individuals' prior criminal history into account for sentencing. Judges and prosecutors will still have large and unchanged sentence ranges to work with under state law. For example, the average sentence for low-level drug sale nationally is 5 years. In Oklahoma, the maximum sentence for that crime will still be 10 years if 805 passes. On a first offense, a person convicted of selling a small amount of drugs who has no prior offense may be sentenced to diversion, probation, or other programming aimed at addressing the root causes of crime, such as that individual's own addiction. If that person has prior offenses, a prosecutor or judge may decide that 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or anything in between is proportionate punishment. But earlier that she says, Kelly, you said that wasn't true. Which one of these is correct? Let's start with you, Sarah.
I mean, I will say that's absolutely correct. We're going in the wrong direction, and one reason is because of the state legislature, because of our hard on crime stance that we've taken, and we need a smart on crime stance in order to do that. And one reason why we took 780 and 781 to the vote of the people and have taken state question 805 to the vote of the people is because the voters understand and they're ready for this type of reform. They're tired of sending people who mainly commit drug and property offenses to prison for life. And this comes from a personal note. When I did pardons, paroles, executions, and commutations for Governor Henry's office, I saw file after file after file. There was one woman, 3 crack charges, life without parole. There were files where we had women who were prostituted out at age 6 and then developed drug addiction. All of this trauma and this history, and then they end up in prison, and then they end up in prison for life. I mean, what we're doing is wrong.
Kelly Masters, Kelly, we've got a disagreement on the facts here. What's your perception?
Well, I agree under state question 805 that you would be able to charge potentially the maxed sentence for a felony. Some of the statutes have the first offense misdemeanor, second offense, and subsequent offense felony. I think state question 805, you would be able to charge the max offense for a felony. However, for a majority of the crimes that I've listed, the max offense is not enough. We know that DV crime is it's an escalation crime. It's a history of coercive control, and to only be allowed to charge the max of a first-time offender is offensive. It's offensive to victims.
Very good. So if you have questions, you feel free to post them either on our Facebook comment section or on our on the YouTube comment section. There's been a request from the audience to have Senator David weigh in on this as a member of the legislature. Senator David, would you like to take, I would say, a minute or so to speak to the issue?
Sure. Can you hear me, Wayne?
Yes.
The only comment I have to make on this, and the concern I have, is that there are domestic violent offenses that progress. And I want to make sure as a legislator that if we have someone who's committing these violent offenses, and we passed a law this year that made strangulation, domestic strangulation, a violent crime. I believe that goes away under the state question because it just went into effect in August. The only thing worse than strangulation is death. It's the next thing. So, I just want to make sure that whatever we do, that everyone understands that potentially very violent people will be the ones who benefit from this. And I don't agree with that.
Thank you, Senator. Sarah, another question from the audience. Why are the prosecutors against this? If all the prosecutors are against it, that seems like strong evidence.
The prosecutors lose a certain amount of power with negotiating plea agreements, and essentially it's a loss of power, and it's a loss of control. But the power and control is out of line, and I just would like to point out the offender that Kelly, used did not get the maximum sentence. He wasn't even subject to the enhancements because he got a 5-year sentence. So enhancements weren't even applicable in his situation. And also, it's the district attorneys can charge assault and battery with a deadly weapon, those crimes which are still subject to enhancements if the circumstances so state.
Kelly, I had a similar thought when I was listening to the cases you were presenting, because all of those were presented under the current law. If the prosecutors and judges can already use can use sentence enhancement now, why would it? And they're not getting appropriate sentences. Why would it be under 805?
Sarah pointed that out, but I appreciate her pointing that out because domestic violent offenders aren't already being held accountable. So why are we trying to pass a constitutional amendment that makes it even easier for them to walk free? These are very violent offenders. They commit heinous crimes and they need to be held accountable. And State Question 805 takes away that accountability.
So we've got, here's an interesting question from the audience. We have 22,000 people in prison right now. How many of them are there for domestic violence crimes?
I think Sarah presented that 80% of those for DV crimes don't have enhancements, but 20% do. I've actually asked the Department of Corrections for that data to look and see how many of our victims will be affected. They actually haven't been able to give me that data. They said they have a hard time keeping track of enhancements. The system's antiquated. Also with the release, the commutations that we had in 2019, that made it even more difficult.
Sarah Edwards, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I just wanted to say I don't know the exact number of those in prison for domestic violence, but as Kelly said, only 80% of those who are in prison for domestic violence, or 80% enhancements, were not used in their case. So enhancements are really not used in domestic violence cases currently. So I think the
people who are in prison, why are they there? Tell us about give us what you understand about the population in the state prison system.
Absolutely, and I'd like to point out too that Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs issued a report, and it's on our website, yeson805.org, that really goes into detail on some of this. That would be really useful to read. But essentially, I want to say 83% of people in prison are there for property and drug crimes. It's the majority of people in prison are there for property and drug crimes with these sentences.
And then that's what 805 is aimed at. Kelly, let me ask you this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I lost the track of my question as it was coming out of my mouth. Remind the audience that if you have questions, you're welcome to post them either in our Facebook Live comment section or in the YouTube section. Timekeeper, how much time do we have left for this section? 5 minutes. We got 5 minutes left to go here. So here's a question from YouTube. How do sentences covered under 805 compared to other states in terms of length? Sarah, I'm going to pose that one to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had mentioned that we are 70 to 79% longer than other states with our property and drug offenses. We are out of line in comparison with other states, which is why we hold the top spots in incarceration.
Kelly, I think you covered this in your in your opening statement, but I'm going to give you a chance to reiterate it perhaps. If the domestic violence problem were solved here, if those crimes were classified as violent crimes, would you be happy with 805, or are there other flaws with the proposal?
Well, several DV crimes have been classified as violent crimes, and those amendments to the statute will take effect in November. I think the issues I have with 805 is that really even if, and again, I've been unable to verify this personally through the Department of Corrections, but even if 83% of those serving sentences for enhancements are for property and nonviolent drug crimes, that leaves approximately 20% that are serving for heinous violent crimes. So why are we going to let 20% of the population out that potentially poses a threat to public safety? In order to reduce the prison population of property and nonviolent drug crimes, we need to look at this from the legislative level and fix it there. This state question is not the answer to that.
Well, what would be a better program of smart on crime reform that we could do to reduce the overwhelming prison population and the overwhelming prison cost without rewriting the Constitution? Give us 2 or 3 ideas.
I mean, you want to rewrite the criminal code, so you're not doing enhanced sentences for nonviolent drug and property crimes. You want to be able to enhance sentences for violent offenders such as DV offenders, because they are not the people that you want out on the street.
You understand the frustration of the people passing the petition, though. The legislature has had a long time to do this, and they haven't done it. Bail reform, which is a pretty basic issue, keeps getting shot down because the bail bondsmen and the sheriffs call their legislators at the last minute. But how can we fix this problem?
I think now is the time to come to the table. We're already on a downward trajectory. Now is the time to come to the table and fix this at the legislative level, not through a state question that, again, freezes what a violent felony is forever and ever and ever as far as sentence enhancement.
You'll agree, though, that the reason we're on the downward trajectory is largely because of the action of the people in a previous state question.
I agree. But I think now is the time that we can come together. Freezing what is a violent crime as far as sentence enhancements that would negatively impact crime victims, such as women of domestic violence, is not the way to do it.
Sarah, why do we need to mess with the Constitution to fix this problem? Why can't we just do this through statute in the legislature? You're muted. We can't hear you.
Thanks. I'd just like to point out quickly that 805 would not let people who commit heinous and brutal crimes out of prison. That's not what it does. But the legislature, again, the voters of Oklahoma understand that it's time to be knocked out of the top spots for incarceration. They want to spend their money on programs and services that work to stop recidivism, right? We know we can save approximately $186 million over the next 10 years that we can then turn around and sink into mental health, substance abuse treatment, job training, education that actually stop offenders. We are not reinventing the wheel here. We have coalition partners that have been studying this for decades. We have experts on research that we have pulled from to come up with these reforms, and we know that this is the way that we need to go.
Kelly, I'm going to give you the last word in our question and answer section here. The premise of smart on crime reform is that we need to lock up the people we're afraid of and take care of those people who can be dealt with through education and treatment for mental illnesses and drug addictions, and keep them taking care of their families instead of, and thereby break the cycle of crime and poverty. Why is State Question 805 not in line with that concept?
Well, and I disagree with Sarah that we're not going to be releasing offenders of heinous crimes because, as I pointed out, DV crimes are quite heinous. You can violently beat a person, strangle them to the point of almost death, and it is not a violent crime in Oklahoma. So I don't think passing a state question that, again, freezes what is a violent crime and never allows sentence enhancements for those that commit violent crimes, although nonviolent in Oklahoma, such as domestic violence, really is going to fix the problem that we have as far as criminal justice reform. It's a public safety risk.
Okay, so that concludes our question period for our first segment. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes to summarize your thoughts today, and we're going to go in reverse order of the introductory remarks. And I think that means, Kelly, you have 2 minutes. You're muted, Kelly.
So the summary in opposition for 805, again, criminal justice reform is needed in the state of Oklahoma, but reduced incarceration rates cannot be placed over above the safety of victims and citizens of Oklahoma. Again, nonviolent felonies in Oklahoma are violent. In fact, several of them have abuse, cruelty, dangerous, deadly actually in the title of those crimes. Perpetrators committing these crimes, again, would be constitutionally limited to the penalty for the first time felony offender. Although House Bill 3251 passed and several DV felonies will now be added to the violent crimes list, those are not going to be allowed to be used for sentence enhancement purposes because they don't go into effect until November 1st of 2020. And again, prosecutors are not allowed to charge a general crime if a specific crime exists. It is precluded under Oklahoma law. Another reason we want them to charge under those specific crimes is the cessation and rehabilitation programs only exist under the specific crimes, not the general code. Just some stats I wanted to leave everyone with. 49% of Oklahoma women actually will experience intimate partner violence, rape, or stalking sometime in their lifetime. And Oklahoma is actually ranked 3rd in the nation for women killed by men and victim single offender homicides. Are these the perpetrators that we want back on the streets? Safety needs to be the #1 priority, and that's why you should vote no on State Question 805.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to conclude your thoughts.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say assault and battery with a dangerous or deadly weapon, assault with intent to kill, murder, manslaughter, kidnapping, burglary, robbery, child abuse, rape, human trafficking, which includes child trafficking, are all violent offenses that that 805 will not affect. It will not affect this. As far as implementing the programs under the domestic violence statutes, the court has discretion to implement programs. And it's just incorrect that the court or that district attorneys don't have discretion in seeking a charge under the violent offense statutes. Title 21, Section 11, if you read further, in the second sentence, it says an act or omission which is made punishable in different ways by different provisions of this title may be punished under any of such provisions, right? The district attorney has discretion to charge a violent offense if the circumstances allow. I just want to say it's time for us to decide whether we want policy based on fear or whether we want policy based on knowledge, research, data, and positive outcomes. I say in God we trust for all spring data, and yes on 805 is the step in the right direction to change Oklahoma's trajectory.
Thank you both. Now we're going to move on to our consideration of State Question 814. Again, each of our advocates will be given up to 6 minutes to make introductory remarks. Then we'll have up to 20 minutes of questions and answers with 2 minutes allotted to each of the speakers to respond to questions that I pose to them. And all the same rules are in place. And we will continue to welcome your questions on our Facebook live comment section or on our YouTube channel comment section. I'm going to begin by reading the ballot title for State Question 815, which was created by legislative referendum. This measure seeks to amend Article 10, Section 40 of the Oklahoma Constitution, Section 40, which directs proceeds from the state's settlements with or judgments against tobacco companies. Currently, Section 40 directs 75% of the proceeds to the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, the TSET fund, where earnings may be used for tobacco prevention programs, cancer research, and other such programs to maintain or improve the health of Oklahomans. The remaining 25% of proceeds are directed to a separate fund for the legislature, the legislative fund. The legislature can also direct some of that 25% to the Attorney General's office. This measure amends Section 40 to reduce the percentage of proceeds that go into the TSET fund from 75% to 25%. As a result, the remaining 75% will go to the legislative fund, and the legislature may continue to direct a portion to the Attorney General. But the measure would also direct the use of the legislative funds, Section 40 currently states that only that the legislative fund is subject to legislative appropriation. If this measure passes, money from the legislative fund must be used to get federal matching funds for Oklahoma's Medicaid program. Speaking for State Question 814 today will be State Senator Kim David. David is proud to represent State District 18, which serves portions of Cherokee, Mays, Muskogee, Tulsa, and Wagner counties. Senator David has served in many legislative roles during her tenure at the Capitol. She had the distinction of being the first Republican woman to serve as Majority Whip and made history again in 2016 when she was chosen to chair the Senate Appropriations Committee, the first woman of either party to hold that post. In 2018, Senator David made history a third time when she became the first woman since statehood to be named Majority Leader of the Oklahoma State Senate. A native Oklahoman, Senator David was raised in Owasso, graduating from Owasso High School, and then earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Petroleum Geology at Oklahoma State University. For the next decade, David worked in petroleum marketing nationally and internationally before turning her attention to raising a family. Once her children were school age, she received an alternative teaching certificate so she could work at their school. She and her husband David have a daughter, son, and 3 grandsons. Speaking against State Question 814 today will be former 16-year Oklahoma Attorney General Drew Edmondson. Edmondson, who is of counsel at the Riggs Abney Law Firm, attended Northeastern State College at Tahlequah. After graduating from college, he enlisted in the United States Navy, where he reached the rank of Petty Officer Second Class and served a tour of duty in Vietnam. He was elected to the Oklahoma legislature in 1974, but then graduated from law school in 1978. He was named Chief Prosecutor for the Muskogee County District Attorney's Office in 1982 and was elected District Attorney that same year. He served there 10 years. He was elected Attorney General in 1984. He was reelected in 1998 without opposition. As his popularity grew, he received more than 60% of the vote in his 2002 and 2006 elections for that office. As Attorney General, Drew Edmondson led the charge to establish the Oklahoma Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, which protected the settlement money and ensured that it can only be spent on public health. The Tobacco Trust balance currently stands at more than $1 billion. He left office in 2011 and has been in private practice ever since. Senator David, we're going to begin with you today. You have up to 6 minutes to give your opening arguments in favor of State Question 814.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for having me on here today to speak on this. For the majority of my time in the legislature, I focused on healthcare and the health outcomes of Oklahomans. And as a rural legislator, I've seen the devastating effects of poor health outcomes that we've had on jobs and the economy, as well as the negative effects on our children's education. During my tenure with the Senate, I served as the Health and Human Services Sub-Appropriations Chair for 6 years before I was the Full Appropriations Chair for 2 years. So I understand the costs associated with Medicaid and the programs that we have in Oklahoma and how our budget is structured. In 2018, the people of Oklahoma voted for Medicaid expansion. And while that will bring federal money into the state and into the providers, there's also a 10% cost to that, and there's an overall administrative cost to the taxpayers of Oklahoma. So State Question 814 addresses a way to help fund the Medicaid expansion program and to fund it in a way that I believe is a win for the people of the state of Oklahoma. Other states, without having TSET money available to do this, other states have had to cut funding to priorities like education, transportation, and public safety. Some have to cut provider rates and use general revenue funds to be able to fund it wholly, which once again cuts into education, which is our other top thing that we have to pay for in the state of Oklahoma. They've had to raise sin taxes and other things to keep up with the increased enrollment. And my biggest fear is that resources would be taken away from the traditional Medicaid population, which are pregnant women and children, the age blind, and the disabled. Thank you for explaining to everyone what the current tobacco settlement fund is used for and how much is in it. Like you said, we have $1 billion in that corpus right now. State Question 814 doesn't touch any of the corpus money that's in that. So the programs that TSET currently has will be able to continue to progress. 25% of the money, the TSET money coming in, will still go towards the corpus so that money can continue to grow and they won't stagnate. What I've asked for is for 75% to go into the Tobacco Settlement Fund, which is the GR fund. Part of that goes to the Attorney General's office. But in 2020, approximately $75 million came into the state of Oklahoma. With that now, we would be able to take about $56 million of that, and if State Question 814 passes, and bring down $3 for every $1. So that $50 million becomes $150 million. In the overall healthcare rankings in Oklahoma, we have fallen 3 places from the year 2000 to the year 2019. We've gone from 43rd to 46th. So when I talk about health outcomes in Oklahoma, it's just a top priority. And so while TSET's helped many Oklahomans stop smoking, and they've helped fund a variety of medical research as well as help place doctors in rural Oklahoma, they've also spent a lot of money on questionable campaigns, promotions for bars and drinking water and money for the house. But what State Question 814 will do, it's going to enable the Healthcare Authority to direct those tobacco settlement funds where they're most needed, and that's the Medicaid program. Since Oklahoma has voted for Medicaid expansion, we've been watching, we've had over 80,000 people currently increase in the existing Medicaid population. So we're expecting a huge number of people with the woodworking effect to come out. The Healthcare Authority has estimated that we will need $164 million to $246 million to be able to fund the expansion population. In every state that has expanded Medicaid, the amount that they have estimated that they would need to be able to pay for it has doubled. So what we're looking for with the woodworking effect is closer to $340 million to even as possibly as much as $450 million. I also want to point out that we have a budget crisis because of the pandemic that's gone on. We also have a budget crisis right now that's affecting our budget. So I think my time is up.
All right. Attorney General Drew Edmondson, you have 6 minutes, Drew Edmondson, you have 6 minutes to make your opening comments.
Wayne, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Tulsa World and the George Kaiser Family Foundation for providing these forums to the people, and not just of Tulsa, but to the state of Oklahoma. And thank you, Senator David, for your service to the state of Oklahoma. I know you make every Owasso Ram proud that you're down there. The Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust was created by a vote of the people in 2000 in the first general election following the settlement with the tobacco industry. And I just want to make a quick point that this didn't just happen. There were a number of AGs that filed lawsuits against the tobacco industry. Oklahoma became one of those under my leadership. And in 1998, I was on the team of 8 that negotiated the Master Settlement Agreement, which structured the payments by the tobacco industry to the states. That's where the money comes from that is going into the Tobacco Settlement and Endowment Trust. It is not taxpayer dollars. It is payments from the tobacco industry for the enormous harm that they did to the state of Oklahoma and the rest of the country by selling cigarettes with promises that they were not addictive and did not cause cancer. In the last 20 years, primarily because of TSET programs, youth smoking rates in Oklahoma have been cut in half. Smoking has declined in Oklahoma at a rate 10 times the rate of states that are similarly situated. Over 400,000 Oklahomans have accessed the Department of Health helpline to quit smoking, and our success rate exceeds federal benchmarks on these kinds of programs. TSET's investments in the Stevenson Cancer Center to fund research was instrumental in Stevenson achieving National Cancer Center designation. The research itself will save more lives. TSET's investment in Stevenson and at OSU for adult stem cell research have led to $182.5 million in additional research monies coming in to the state of Oklahoma. TSET has partnered with the Physician Manpower Training Commission to fund doctors in rural areas, currently funding 26 doctors. 37 other doctors have participated in the program, and 54% of them stay where they are in rural Oklahoma rather than leaving. TSET's work has saved more than 42,000 lives in the state of Oklahoma and helped the state avoid $1.24 billion in medical costs. TSET is only allowed to spend earnings out of the corpus. They cannot spend the corpus itself, and that's a limitation on what they can do. Earnings increase when the corpus increases. So by cutting the income to TSET by 2/3 from the $50 million that it gets now, 49 point something, to $16.5 million that will go to the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, which will drastically affect its ability to fund programs with greater help or different programs in the future. Fiscal year 19 funding for all programs was $49.5 million. In contrast, Big Tobacco spends $172 million each year marketing in Oklahoma alone. So TSET's spending $49 million to combat it. The industry is spending $172 million to promote it. TSET's total administrative costs are a low 3% of its budget. Since its inception, there have been those who have tried to get rid of TSET. Luckily, we've had the foresight to put TSET in the Constitution, so the legislature could not gut these effective anti-smoking measures on their own. They would need a vote of the people. In 2000, State Question 692 established TSET, receiving more than 69% of the vote. Over 2/3 of the voters in the state of Oklahoma said they wanted an independent board made up of medical professionals making the decisions on how the money would be spent, not the legislature. After our lawsuit was filed in 1998, the state engaged in discovery, obtaining documents from the tobacco industry. That's how we know they were deliberately marketing to children. That's how we learned that they knew that cigarettes were addictive, labeling them as nicotine delivery devices. That's how we knew that they referred to our children as replacement market, taking the place of their dead customers.
All right, I think your 6 minutes has run, Drew Edmondson. So we're going to go on to our question and answers. We'll have about 20 minutes here of answering questions from our audience. There's still time for our live viewers to submit questions through the comments section on our Facebook and YouTube presentations. As before, I'm going to direct questions to one or both of you, and you'll have up to 2 minutes to answer. I'm going to give you a chance. Give both of you a chance at the first question from the audience. State question 814 would restrict money to Medicaid spending, but not specifically to funding Medicaid expansion. If this question passes in its current version, what would prevent the money currently being used to fund Medicaid from merely being replaced with these dollars, like what people feel like happened with the education funding that was supposed to come from the lottery? Drew Edmondson, we'll give you the first shot at that one. 2 minutes.
That's a very good question, and the answer is absolutely nothing. The budget for the Healthcare Authority, which handles Medicaid, is over $6 billion. Over $1 billion of that is from the state of Oklahoma. That's a lot of money. The amount that they're going to get from TSET, reducing TSET's $49 million to $16, is going to be a drop in the bucket compared to what the Healthcare Authority needs. That is a responsibility of state government to be funded out of the revenues of the state. TSET money is not state revenues. They need to do what needs to be done with our tax system, with loopholes, with other areas, rather than coming after a very effective program that does exactly what it was intended to do. If they fail in that mission, they shouldn't be looking for effective programs and cripple them as well in order to fulfill their statutory responsibility to fund Medicaid.
Senator David, people are suspicious. The lottery, 1017, liquor by the drink, horse racing. We keep hearing about solutions to state funding that the money just seems to get moved around and disappear. What keeps the legislature from doing that with this time?
Well, I could go into a lot of argument about where all that money goes. And for one thing, people just don't play the lottery in Oklahoma, and let's be clear on that. But there is a bill that we passed at the end of the year that was Senate Bill 1529. That was the companion bill to this. And what that bill does is it ties the hands that this money goes off the top directly to the Healthcare Authority to go to pay for Medicaid and to draw down federal dollars. So even though people can say that yes, the legislature can take it and use it somewhere else, I want you to also think about the fact that Medicaid is the second largest cost to the state of Oklahoma past education. So if we don't have the money to fund Medicaid, we end up cutting education. We end up cutting transportation. We end up cutting public safety. Those are education is over 50% of our budget. Medicaid now it's running right around 46% of our budget. We need every dollar that we can get to be able to pay for this new population, the majority of which are able-bodied working adults that have expensive health-related issues as a result of smoking. So when the people of the state of Oklahoma wanted TSET to be able to pay for health care because of smoking, I think this falls in line with that. We're not touching the corpus of TSET. I appreciate everything that TSET has done and what Drew Edmondson had set forth for Oklahoma. We're one of the few states that still has that money. And I feel like this is a very effective and thoughtful approach to not disturb any of the programs that they're doing with TSET, but to be able to use some of that money for this same population that TSET was currently had programs set up for that now we are paying for in Medicaid.
Drew Edmondson, a member of our audience has asked a question that I've had in my mind for some time. We all know that you are an advocate for Medicaid expansion. If we don't get the money from 814, how do we pay for that now?
Well, Oklahoma Policy Institute, and if you go to their website, you can read it, has outlined over a half a dozen different areas that could be drawn upon in order to fund not only Medicaid expansion, but could contribute significantly to funding Medicaid. The legislature has proven unwilling to do that. When I was advocating for Medicaid expansion, I talked about doing away with the exemption on capital gains from income tax. I talked about the gross production tax. I talked about closing loopholes where the corporate income tax revenue is almost nothing because of loopholes. All of these things can be done if the legislature has the will to do it. They don't. And one of the things I started to mention a while ago is that in our discovery of tobacco industry documents, their lobbyists were reporting year after year 100% success rates with the legislature. Every bill they wanted passed, passed. Every bill they wanted killed, died. And there's still over a dozen lobbyists in the legislature specifically dedicated to tobacco industry work. It's not going to happen.
So, David, I'm not only interested in hearing your perspective on that same question. One of our viewers has, in fact, posed it to you. Isn't there some other way to pay for Medicaid in general, Medicaid expansion, but traditional Medicaid, other than taking this money away from the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust?
Well, what Drew Edmondson was talking about is raising taxes on people. Yes, I guess we could raise taxes, which is almost impossible to do. As you guys well know, a few years ago when we were in one of the worst budget crises of the state, it took four sessions, 3 special sessions, to be able to get a budget finally passed with some increase, which, by the way, was an increase on cigarettes, which I just want to defend my profession here for a minute. I wasn't in the legislature when all this happened, and we have gone against them. We've taxed them time and time again, and we raised that again during that budget crisis by $1 a pack. They didn't want that. They fought hard against us on that. We also raised gross production, but right now that fund is down over 50%, mostly because of COVID and the shutdown that we've had in the state.
I wonder if you could explain to us just some of the nuts and bolts of Medicaid. Well, how big is its budget? How much does it spend every year right now? And who's covered by Medicaid? Actually, I'll answer that. Who's covered by Medicaid? It's children, pregnant women, and the traditional aged, blind, and disabled population, the nursing home population. You're right there. How big is the budget for Medicaid every year, and how big do you expect it to grow?
Well, just the part that the state portion of the spending is well over $750 million, and that's just the state portion that we use to bring down federal matching dollars. So when I talk about how important it is for this $50 million to turn into $150 million, we are looking at, with the expansion population, this being over $1 billion budget that we will need to pay the state's portion.
Drew Edmondson, you'll concede that Medicaid expenses have burgeoned in the state budget. Not that long ago, it was maybe the 5th or 6th largest piece of the pie in state appropriations, and it's gone to 4th, to 3rd, and now it's 2nd. It's the only thing that's getting more money than Medicaid in Oklahoma right now are the public schools, and everything below it is losing money as a result. How do we handle that? How do we control that?
Well, the healthcare authority budget is huge, and the amount that comes from the state, in excess of $1 billion, is also huge. The $35 million they're going to take away from TSET will be a drop in the bucket in terms of trying to meet the needs of the healthcare authority and Medicaid, but it is critical to TSET. It's crippling to TSET to take that money in terms of trying to fund new programs, trying to increase funding to existing programs. This is going to be a crippling blow to an agency that is doing exactly what it was intended to do and has been very successful in doing it. If we want to properly fund Medicaid, there are ways to do it. None of them are easy. but there are ways that do not create taxes on individuals, particularly middle income individuals. You know, when you do away with the capital gains exemption from income tax, you're affecting millionaires. You're affecting people who earn in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, who make real estate investments hoping that they'll give them a capital gain down the road, or invest in stocks to do the same thing. That's not middle America, that's not middle Oklahoma, but it is, and by the way, not very many states do that, exempt capital gains. It is a form of income, and to say that form of income is not going to be taxed is something that we decided to help rich people.
So you think that's really enough money to fund a $1 billion agency that's about to become a $2 billion agency?
Oh, it's a $6 billion agency. We're talking about the state's share of it, which may go from $1 billion to 1.2 or 3 billion. And no, the single source elimination of capital gains exemption will not do it by itself. But there's a laundry list of things out there that, I mean, our former auditor, Gary Jones, had a whole list of things that needed to be done. He's a Republican, but he's saying these are not fair. They cost us income every year, and the legislature simply won't, they're sacred cows, and the legislature won't touch them.
So in 2000, the voters approved state question, I think it was 682, and you were the principal architect of that. And it set up the system where 75% of the money went to the endowment and 25% went to the legislature for essentially for any legal purpose. And why do you think voters approved that back in 2000? And do you think they, although they wrote in the Constitution, do you think they really meant to permanently put 75% of that money in this endowment fund, that was to never be changed?
That's what they voted to do. There's no reason to believe they didn't know that. It was going in the Constitution, for heaven's sake. And I think they did it. And by the way, I want to give credit to Robert Butkin, who was then the state treasurer of Oklahoma, who co-chaired that campaign with me. Robert Butkin, and I believe to probably a lesser extent myself, had a great deal of credibility with the people back in 1998 and 2000. And we convinced them it was a good idea. It was a good idea. It has proven to be a good idea and should not be crippled.
So, Senator David, the people voted for this in 2000, and the legislature should be pretty slow to undo the work of the people. Why are you trying to get at this money that the people have already decided how they want distributed?
Well, it's a great question. I was one of those people that voted for that back then. What I will say is those times were different. The Medicaid program didn't cover able-bodied working adults, the ones that are most affected, that have the worst health outcomes because of smoking. Back then, the only program we had to help those people came out of the Sept money that we put back. And now that corpus has grown to $1 billion, they are not hurting for money. And they've got some great programs. They've also got some waste that they could trim back. So I'm not even asking them to do that. And the fact that they spend some, over, $770,000 on billboards, they can do that. All I'm just saying is that as a voter and one of the people in the state of Oklahoma, now that we are covering this population in Medicaid, the same services that Sept were previously covering for those individuals, healthcare, cessation, counseling, those things are now going to be paid for by Medicaid. So some of that money, new money coming in, should be diverted to help pay for those services that we will now be paying through Medicaid.
The Drew Edmondson, I'm sorry, Drew Edmondson made an interesting point in his opening statement, which was that from the day the TSET fund was set up, there have been legislators trying to get at it. They've been trying to spend the corpus. They've been trying to divert the revenue stream. Why is this a different occasion? Remind us.
Is this for me? I agree with you. They have. In fact, I had a hard time getting this bill passed because I had legislators that thought we should go after the corpus, that we should be doing other things with it, that we should be setting up grant programs for hospitals in rural Oklahoma, all very great. I just felt this was a very thoughtful approach to, like I said, taking some of that money from TSET to pay for that same population that they currently serve with some of the programs that they run. People need to understand that the programs that TSET, a lot of the programs that TSET paid for are now going to be paid for by Medicaid. So I also ran the companion bill to make sure that every one of those dollars had to go to draw down those federal dollars because of that.
We've had some of our viewers ask us to explain some of the jargon terms we've been throwing around here. When we say corpus, what's happening here is that money comes in from the tobacco companies as part of the settlement, and it goes into a trust, an endowment, which we refer to as the corpus, and that's the money that you can't spend. The TSET can't spend. That's managed by professionals, including the state treasurer, and then a separate independent board determines what to do with the money that's earned by that money. So the corpus is the savings account, and the money that TSET actually gets to spend is the interest on the savings account. There's also been a question about what you were referring to the woodworking effect, which is kind of a technical Medicaid term, but let's see if I can explain it correctly. The idea is that when you expand Medicaid, you get a lot of people between 18 and 64 who suddenly become eligible for Medicaid, and they sign up for it. But while they're signing up for it, they realize, hey, my kid is also eligible for Medicaid under the traditional Medicaid program, and that would be and they signed up the child at the same time. So while the Medicaid expansion program, which is funded at a 9-to-1 federal match, is growing, the traditional Medicaid program is also growing. That people are coming out of the woodwork, in other words, and the traditional Medicaid eligible people, the children, pregnant women, and aged, blind, and disabled, that's only funded, generally speaking, at a 2-to-1 federal match. Is that correct? So here's a question from our viewers. One of the selling points of expanding Medicaid was that it would pay for itself through economic growth and $1 billion brought into the state economy. Drew, if it's going to pay for itself, do we need to pay for it with 814?
No, we don't. And the estimates vary, but I don't think there's any variance in the fact that the $1 billion coming into the state, the 90%, we pay a 10% match on the expansion of Medicaid, a 10%. By the way, we could have gotten this expansion with no match at all if the legislature had opted in when it was first made available. We chose not to do it. And after the first year, tax revenues will be generated from that $1 billion infusion into the economy of the state of Oklahoma. That some estimates are it will more than cover the expansion. It certainly will provide in excess of $100 million in additional revenue because of income taxes, sales taxes, everything else from that infusion of money into the state of Oklahoma. There is a short-term problem, and that's the startup. Because as the senator pointed out, we're in a budget problem right now. They need to find money for the startup. After that, it should pay for itself. But they're using a constitutional amendment and a permanent fix to solve a short-term problem. The red sign is 1 minute left, I thought. Okay, just for clarification. I thought I got cut off a little early on my primary speech. They need money, that's understood. They're not going to solve the problem by taking the money from TSET, but they're going to do great damage to TSET in the process.
All right. I think we're getting close to the end of our time for questions and answers here. Am I right, timekeeper? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to throw the last question to you, Senator David. It's the same question that Drew Edmondson just answered. If Medicaid expansion is going to pay for itself through economic growth and many other reasons why it legitimately should pay for itself, why do we need to pay for it by diverting money from a program that's doing an awful lot of good for the state of Oklahoma?
Well, Wayne, I would like to know of what state Medicaid expansion paid for itself. I do know of 13 different states that have had to raise taxes and cut services to be able to fund the expansion. I don't know of one, and that's even the ones who got it paid for at 100%, that have made money off of it. Providers will make money off of this. The state taxpayers will not. The budget will not. We still have the administrative cost. Even if it had been covered at 100%, we would still have the administrative cost of it. And quite frankly, we felt like for years we didn't expand Medicaid in Oklahoma because we weren't sure it was even going to, that the 100% was going to stay, or the 90%. I quite honestly don't expect the 90% to stay around much longer. I expect the federal government to go back on that. Currently, we get 64% funded through the federal government. That's what we get right now. And with the amount of population that's going on Medicaid right now, if the federal government backs off on that 90% on this expansion population, our budget will really take a hard hit.
Okay, I'm going to conclude our question period with that, and we'll move on to some final comments. And we're going to give each of you 2 minutes to make your final remarks. Drew Edmondson, I'm sorry if we cut you off early in your opening comments, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes now to say anything you want.
Thank you, Wayne. As long as it's on this issue,
yeah,
I will keep it there. Just a reminder that TSET was not created by the legislature. It was created by a vote of the people. TSET does not spend tax money. It spends the earnings off the annual payments from the tobacco industry based on the sales of cigarettes. TSET cannot be bullied or bought by lobbyists. By the way, the more successful TSET is in reducing smoking rates, and with the same process going on in other states, income from the tobacco industry is going to go down. TSET is prepared to deal with that. We're not prepared to have it taken away by the legislature. Oklahoma Policy Institute has listed over a half dozen sources of funding for the Medicaid expansion without tapping into the resources of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. So we're back to the question we asked the voters in 2000. Do you trust the legislature to do the right thing with this money? Back then, the answer was a resounding no. They wanted it put into a foundation that was insulated. And by the way, the members of the board determining where that money is going are appointed by the governor, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, the attorney general, the state auditor, and the state treasurer. You know, these are government officials appointing the board members. They're supposed to be healthcare professionals, but they're appointed by these political office holders. If they made any bad decisions about billboards, talk to the governor about that. Have him speak to his appointee. But they're insulated from the lobbyists. They're insulated from the legislature. They're able to spend this money on the real healthcare needs of the people of the state of Oklahoma that the legislature can't do. Legislature can't fund cancer research at Stevenson Cancer Center. TSET can. And if you want answers to the questions plaguing us in the near future, then we need to keep TSET where it is.
Senator David, you get the final word on this question. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. TSET has helped many Oklahomans. The voters of Oklahoma voted for and have supported TSET because they wanted dedicated funding to help Oklahomans become healthier. Using a portion of this money to bring down additional federal dollars to pay for Medicaid is a win for everyone. The current $1 billion corpus will continue to grow. It will still receive 25% of the additional funds coming in every year. 75% of that will now be able to go into a fund to bring actual health care to able-bodied working adults that will now be in the Medicaid system. These are the same people that have the most expensive health-related issues as a result of smoking. And I believe the people of the state of Oklahoma wanted this money to be able to go towards paying for the health care of people who were affected by smoking. And this does that. And I think it does it. It's a win-win either way for the people of the state of Oklahoma.
Thank you. So if we were in a live setting, as we have been in the past on these forums, at this point, I'd be asking the audience to give all 4 of our advocates a big round of applause. So we can't do that. So all I can do is thank you all today. Sarah Edwards, Kelly Masters-Newton, Drew Edmondson, and Kim David. You have helped us understand 2 complicated issues better and help the league understand things as we go forward in trying to put together a position on this. The election on both of these questions will be held November 3rd. Any registered Oklahoma voter in any party can participate. Early voting is, I believe, October 29th, October 30th, Thursday, October 20th, and Saturday, October 31st, Halloween, at locations and times that would be announced by your local election boards. The state election board hasn't posted a sample ballot yet, but they will be available soon on the board's voter portal, along with a lot of other critical information for voting. The voting portal web address is okvoterportal.okelections.us. If you're voting in person, be sure to bring your voter ID card, which is issued by your county election board, or a valid government-issued photo ID. If you have neither of these with you, you still can vote. State law requires that you be allowed to vote by a provisional ballot. If you're voting by absentee ballot, please read the instructions carefully and follow them completely. In the November election, absentee ballots may have their ballots, absentee voters may have their ballots verified by a notary public, or in some cases by 2 people, or you can simply attach a copy of any photo ID that would be valid, or county voter registration card, anything that would be valid for you to vote in person. You attach a copy of that with your absentee ballot, and if you fill out the forms correctly, you'll be fine. Again, it's important to follow all the instructions that come with your absentee ballot, including signing the affidavit and attaching a copy of your ID. If you have questions not answered, please contact your county election board or the state election board at info@elections.ok.gov. Anyone voting by any method on November 3rd will want to pay attention to the October 11th editions of the Tulsa World and the Oklahoman for the State League of Women Voters Guide, a complete and nonpartisan look at the complete ballot, questions, and candidates. More helpful information can also be found anytime at okvoterguide.com, where you'll find links to okvoter.org, vote411.org, TIPRO's 918 vote, as well as the Oklahoma election boards. Again, that website is okvoterguide.com. So this concludes today's candidate forum. Remember to join us in 15 minutes for our Zoom conversation that's supposed to take place at 5:45. That would be 15 minutes from now, for our Zoom conversation amongst league members about what advocacy position the state league should take on state question 805 and 814. But until then, I will say thank you all for joining us and good afternoon.